This is on, right? I think it is. Okay. So, no, I just have to check. So the other day I was chatting with a friend of mine and we were talking about husbands and being a wife and how hard it is to not treat your husband the same way that you treat your children. And I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. And she said, you know, you should really do a video on that. I said, yeah, but right now I'm just kind of in this mom zone and that's where I'd like to stay for a while because it's comfortable. And she said, yeah, but that kind of relates to being a mom as well, doesn't it? And I was like, I mean, yeah, I guess so. And so it's been on the back of my mind. And then today I was hanging out with another friend of mine and we ended up talking about the same basic thing and it just came up. And I think it's been on my mind. And so I was like, you know, I think I'm going to talk about it. Welcome to Talks with Jess. So I think we can all agree that being a wife is not an easy task. I think we can also agree that we just want the best out of the people that are around us, including ourselves. I think in many ways, we as women were created to be mothers. We were created to raise children. And so it's in our nature to see areas in which we can instruct, in which we can help our children to become better, and all of that. So I think that our problem inherently comes from a place of good, a place of this is who we are and how we are. And I don't honestly think that we start out just wanting to control everything our husbands do. I don't think that we start out thinking, oh, my husband's such a child and I need to change him and instruct him and raise him up to actually become a man. I don't think that very many of us actually go into marriage thinking that, right? We might get to the point in marriage, however, where we start to get to know our spouse a little bit better and we start to realize that yes, they're a man, but this idea of what we want in a man is very different sometimes than what our men are actually giving us. And that's not to diss the men. I think that comes from a lot of different areas. I think that honestly, I think that boils down to the sin in our entire world, and I think that in a lot of ways, Satan has orchestrated things to break down every single good thing that God created. And one of the good things God created was marriage. But look at how broken marriages are. And I've paid attention to broken marriages. I've paid attention to how shows depict marriage. I have paid attention to movies, books, actual people around me, people in my church, people outside of my church, like anyone and everyone. And I've noticed a lot of common themes. And now I'm not here to tell anybody that this is the only reason or anything like that. And also, I just need to throw a disclaimer out there. I am an observer of people. I have a lot of opinions. I am a passionate person and I love marriage and the whole idea of love and all of that. And I think that it is beautiful and wonderful. I am not a therapist. I am not somebody who is here to diagnose anyone. And I'm certainly not here to counsel you on how to fix your marriage or save your marriage. This is just my thoughts and opinions when it comes to the Bible and how it applies to our marriage, to our lives, to being a mom. So please just take that into account. I also encourage you to do your own research. Look into the word yourself. If you're struggling in your marriage and you think that maybe some of the things that I have said resonate, I highly encourage you to do your own research, to do your own digging, to try and understand to find your own perspective on this, because I think so often we see somebody else's opinion and they're well-spoken or they make a good point even, and we just start taking that and applying that to ourselves without digging deeper, without asking further questions. And I think that can be very harmful. So just look into it yourself. And if you're like, yeah, no, that doesn't apply to me at all, then awesome, you are killing it as a wife. And maybe if you could share some secrets with me, because I'm not. So I have a confession. I am not a natural at being a wife. This area for me has been one of the biggest areas of struggle. And I still struggle with it. every single day, legitimately every single day. And I probably will for the rest of my life because of my temperament, because of who I am, and maybe even just the fact that I'm a woman. I don't know. I find myself trying to control my husband a lot. And like I said, it doesn't come from a place of wanting control. It comes from a place of seeing where he can be better and wanting to help him be better. While our intentions are good, what happens when we start treating our husbands like children? I think that this causes a spiral in marriage. I think that I have a lot of thoughts and opinions on this topic, but I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it legitimately. I'm feeling really emotional tonight for some reason. My husband and I have been together since we were 16 years old. When we first got together, we were in high school, and so it was an on again, off again kind of a relationship because of me, not because of him, because honestly, the way he tells it, he has been wanting to marry me since 5 weeks into us dating. But I wasn't ready for a serious relationship, and so I kept halting it, and there were a lot of people that felt very protective over me, and Ryan was not the most godly of young men, and so people kept trying to push me in their own ways and tell me that they didn't think that he was right for me. And I'm such a people pleaser that I listened. Even though I knew in my heart that we were good for each other, and even though I saw in him something much greater than everybody else saw, I listened, and so I broke up with him 3 times. One of those times, I broke off our engagement. And I think it's still a point of hurt for him that I was so indecisive about being with him, and that I listened to other people so much that I decided to break up with him. Honestly, it was also one of the best things that happened, because we grew while we were separate. He went to one college and I went to another, and I had my whole senior year, well, half of my senior year, where I wasn't with anyone, and that whole summer it was just me, and I started to find myself. And then I went to college for that first semester, and oh man, God did so many things in my life. I started realizing that the list that I had for myself, for the husband that I wanted, was kind of dumb and very shallow. I had a certain vision of the kind of man that I would end up with, and that's the man that I was looking for. And that's part of why Ryan never measured up, because it was the wrong list. And honestly, I was focusing on the wrong thing. So through this time, God started showing me that I needed to stop focusing on who I was going to marry and focusing on who I was going to be when I married. And that is a whole different view. So I started looking at myself. I started looking at my own characteristics, my own morals, my beliefs, the fundamental things that were in my heart and soul that weren't aligning with God, and the ones that were. And slowly but surely, God started taking that list that I had created of the perfect man that was going to fulfill me, and He started changing everything on it. He changed everything, including the whole purpose for me to be married. Go down south about 12 hours, and you would find my husband slowly becoming the man that God was putting on my list. All of the things that He kept putting on my list were things that He was developing in His heart. And so that's Christmas break. We saw each other, and we were done, right? We were like, we've tried this 3 times. It hasn't worked. We are still going to stay best friends, because seriously, we've been best friends since pretty much day 1. And I'll tell you that story another time. And so we were done. We were finished with this whole relationship thing. We were just going to be friends. Well, that obviously didn't work out. I realized as soon as He opened that door, and I'm not a cheesy kind of a person, but I kid you not, God pulled up that list the moment that He opened that door, and He held it up against Ryan and checked all the boxes. And I was like, whoa. And in that instant, I made the decision. I made the decision that he was it. He was the one that I was going to be with. And slowly, throughout the next 2 years, God continued to work on me, and he continued to work on Ryan. Even though Ryan took a step back, some things started happening in his life, and he stopped seeking after God's heart. And this plays in a little while. So we got married at 21. And looking back on it, maybe it was too early. I think we probably could have waited another couple of years in order for both of us to be healthier and more mature. But also, we wouldn't be who we are today had we not married. And I kind of like who we are becoming. And we also have 3 absolutely beautiful children who obviously would not be these same children. So before we got married, I moved down to where he was at and was living there for a couple of months, and that's when we decided that we were ready to get married and started planning. And I was living in my apartment, and I remember we were fighting a lot. Now, this didn't raise any red flags because we always fought. He and I are pretty much complete opposite people in almost every way. It's funny because the longer we've been together, the more alike we seem in certain ways, but fundamentally at our very core, we are completely opposite people. So tension was always a thing in our relationship. It always had been. Didn't even faze us that we were fighting so much, but looking back on it, I realized we were fighting a lot. I mean, that tension was intense and extreme, and not very healthy for either one of us. And this carried on into our marriage. So less than a year into our marriage, Ryan's mom passed away. And his dad had passed away right after we met when we were 16. So now he was 22 years old and parentless. His mom got to see him get married, but nothing else. That was it. And I tell you what, not to put it all on me, but speaking from my own experience, being a wife of a grieving man is very different than being the best friend of a grieving boy. That affected our marriage in huge, huge ways. He withdrew. He naturally does. He's a very introverted person. And so he withdrew into himself. He shut down for several years. He fell into some bad habits. He started lying to me a lot. Things started spiraling. And a lot of this I didn't even know until later. I knew that something was wrong. I could sense it. But my response was even worse, because instead of giving it to God, instead of praying, instead of just loving him, I set to fixing him. We had conversation after conversation after conversation, which really was just me talking at him, of us trying to figure out what was wrong. And basically that was me saying, hey, I've noticed this, and this, and I need you to figure out what you're, why you're doing this so that you can fix it. And I'll help you. And in the moment, it just felt like, I love you so much, and I see that you're hurting, and I see that you're struggling, and I know that we both want a certain type of marriage. So this is the only thing that I feel like I can actually do to help whatever situation we're in. And so my instinct was to control him, to start trying to change him, to start trying to teach him how to be a better husband, because I was still so young and it was still so early in our marriage. I didn't realize that a lot of the problems were coming from his relationship with God, which was not the greatest, and the grief that he was struggling with his mom. I started realizing these things later, but in that moment, it was just, we're newly married, neither one of us knows how to be married, but I have a lot of ideas and opinions on the kind of husband that you're supposed to be, so let's get to it. And a lot of times I'd come back to, where is that man that I saw when he opened that door to greet me that checked all the boxes? Where did he go? I am so frustrated because I feel lied to, because I had that man. He was there. I saw him. I knew that he was becoming this amazing man who had his heart aligned with God and checked all the boxes. And then all of a sudden he took steps back and back and back. And he went back into a lot of the things that he was. And he even further started displaying things that he never had before. And I started questioning our marriage. But more than anything, I questioned him. Over and over and over. I questioned him and I questioned him. And I tried to fix him. Every day, I tried to fix him. And I feel so terrible for that now, because I just think, how must he have felt? Here he is. He has no idea how to do life as an adult. He's newly married. He's just trying to figure out what it even means to be a man. He's dealing with the loss of his mom. And now he has a wife who is constantly pointing out all the ways in which he is wrong, all of the things that he's doing that he needs to fix and do better at. And he was so overwhelmed and so frustrated and angry. And I noticed that. He kept getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And of course, I didn't look at myself. I didn't say, Jess, what are you doing to cause this? I just thought, well, he needs to get a hold of himself better. Oh, maybe I can help him do that. Maybe I can help point this out. Maybe if I just keep telling him what he should be doing, eventually something will come through and he'll do it. Yeah. So I try not to beat myself up too much about it, because I know I'm not the only one. I've spoken to a lot of other wives, and I know that a lot of you struggle with this too. After a while, I did start to look at myself. I did start to think, what can I do about this? What am I doing that is contributing to the problem? What am I doing wrong? And I don't think that those were the wrong questions to ask, but I started researching and I started learning, and it kept hitting a wall. What I kept running into was, treat your husband as if he were already the man that you want him to be. And treat your husband with the love and respect that he deserves. Not because of who he is now, but because of the simple fact that he's your husband. And stop trying to tell your husband all the things that he's doing wrong. Okay. That's all fine and dandy, but I have this little issue. I have this problem in myself. And maybe this is an ungodly, sinful thing in my soul, or maybe it's just a thing. I don't know. But I have this issue where I need to feel heard. I need to feel seen. And I don't think that's an uncommon thing, especially for women. I want to feel like my husband cares about me and about my hurts, about my feelings, about my emotions. I need to feel like he genuinely sees me. And well, if there's anything I've learned about men, it's that they're not the most attentive creatures. And I'm okay with that. I get it. We're all different. Men and women were obviously created differently, right? We all have our strengths and our weaknesses. And paying attention to subtle cues is not really a man's strength, not for most men anyway. So knowing that, I've always taken that into consideration and said, okay, I know that I need to feel validated. I know that I need to feel seen and heard. So when I have a husband who obviously is not going to do that on his own, because he, by his own admission, is not somebody who's particularly attentive, then the next best thing for me to do is to tell him. If I don't tell him, then he won't notice, and then I'll be upset that he's not noticing, so why don't we just nip it at the bud and just tell him instead of brooding around the house because, oh, he hasn't noticed that I'm upset, blah, 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 you know? So there's that part of things. And then also, if I don't tell him the things that hurt my feelings, if I don't tell him that what he's doing is not coming across to me and translating the way I know he's intending it to, then how am I ever going to be seen? How is any of this ever going to get fixed? How am I going to feel heard and loved and cherished and taken care of? How am I going to feel like more than just a piece of furniture that's been in his life so long that he doesn't even realize it's there anymore? How? If I don't tell him, how is he going to see? And so I kept running into this over and over and over and over again. Enter a book. Now, I don't often attribute life changes to books. I read a lot of books, I watch a lot of movies, a lot of shows, listen to podcasts. I mean, you name it, I usually consume it when it comes to entertainment and learning materials. I love to learn. I've done so much research. I know pretty much all of the classic tips and tricks on having an amazing marriage. But I think one is often overlooked. I think, and if it's not overlooked, then it's definitely understated. And that's the power of prayer. And more specifically, the power of a praying wife. I read this book, The Power of a Praying Wife by Stormy O. Martin. This book is amazing. This book will change your marriage. I had no idea. So when this book entered my life, I believe I was pregnant with my first son. My daughter was a year old or so. And our marriage was basically non-existent. We weren't friends anymore. We were basically just roommates who had sex occasionally. And things just weren't great. We had lost that spark that we had. And there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of it is me and my own things. A lot of them is him and his own things. But let's just say things weren't good. They weren't good at all. It definitely was not the marriage that I had envisioned. It wasn't the marriage that I really wanted. And I don't think it was the marriage he wanted either. Actually, I know it wasn't. So this book came into my life at the time when I needed it the most. And I started reading through it, and I was doing it along with a couple of friends of mine. And I was just kind of going along with it. And I started noticing something. So in this book, Stormy O. Martin, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. I'm sorry if it's not. She talks about how important it is to pray for your husband and to pray for every single area of his life. And so through the book, she goes through and she covers a different topic every single chapter. And so within that, she gives a couple of pages of explanation as to why this is such an important thing for us to pray for our husbands. And then she gives an example prayer, and she gives some power verses, she calls them. And so I was trying to do about one a day. I would read through the couple of pages, and then I would copy the prayer, and I would pray it fervently, adding some of my own things and changing some stuff to fit me and our life. And I want to say it was maybe about a week or two in, I noticed that some of the things that I had stopped talking to my husband about, that I had stopped bringing to him because I was taking them to God instead, started magically changing. Like, seriously. Conversations he never wanted to have were happening, and there was just new life in our marriage. Things that had been deeply hurting me stopped happening as often. Jokes that were being made, or I don't know, it was little things. It wasn't anything major or huge. That comes later. And I started realizing how important it is. But more than my husband, I started noticing that through praying for my husband, God was changing my heart. I was becoming more compassionate towards my husband. I was starting to realize that his struggles were deep and important, and I needed to be kind towards him as he struggled through them. I started learning that it is not for me to control my husband. It is not for me to try and change him. It is not for me to try and bring him to God. It is not for me to mold him into the man that God wants him to be. That's God's job. My job is to love him. My job is to take care of him in the ways that I can as a wife. My job is to respect him and honor him as a wife. My job is, more than anything else, to become the best wife that I can be and let God do what he needs to do in his life. And I kept trying to fix our marriage by trying to fix him. I kept trying to fix everything that was wrong because the way I saw it, he was the major contributor. But really, my heart was in the wrong place. So wrong. And And God changed my heart. He showed me that He's got this, that it's His job to mold and shape my husband. I am not my husband's mother. And I say that a lot now. A lot of times when we're in conversation and we're having a conflict and we're discussing, we don't really fight the way we used to anymore, like hardly ever, which praise the Lord for that, seriously, thank you. He'll fall into an old habit of his of asking me, well, what do I need to do? Because he's so used to me telling him what to do, you know? And I've started saying, babe, I'm not your mom. I can't tell you what to do. I'm not teaching you anymore. That's not my job. It's your job to go figure out what the answers are. I'm simply bringing this to you, and I am here as a sounding board. I will give you some thoughts and opinions on things, but I don't want to be your teacher anymore. I'm tired of trying to raise you. That's God's job. And I started noticing also that my first response when I had an issue with my husband was not to go to my husband and talk to him about it, but to talk to God. And 9 times out of 10, by the time I finished talking to God about it, I knew I wasn't supposed to talk to my husband about it. And I had no real feeling deep inside of me that I needed to. And sometimes God made it very apparent that it was something I needed to talk to him about. And He gave me the right time, the right place, and the right heart, both in me and in my husband, for us to discuss this issue. But when I wasn't going to God about things first, I would always pick the wrong place, the wrong time, and the wrong status of heart, both in me and my husband, in order to discuss things, and it would blow up and turn into this huge, horrible thing. So, what do you do when you just want to be heard? What do you do when you just want the best marriage? What do you do when you know that your husband has so much to offer and he is not doing it? What do you do when you look at him and you say, you are an amazing human being, but you're being crappy right now. You're hurting me. Why do you keep doing this? What do you do when you just want to fix him? You pray. Honestly, that's my best advice for you. You need to start in prayer. And if you think that prayer is not that important, then you need to get serious about prayer. Honestly. Because until you give that control up to God, until you start letting God raise your husband, until you stop mothering your husband and start loving him the way God asks you to and letting God take over and do the rest, your marriage is never going to be what you want it to be. And you will continue to be frazzled and upset and hurt and frustrated. And I know how hard it is to give up that control, because you think, how are my needs going to be addressed if I don't express my needs, if I don't stand up for myself? But in a marriage, it is not your job to protect yourself. It is not your job to take care of yourself. It is your job to love your husband. It is your job to love him the way God asked you to love him. And everything else needs to be up to God. And I want you to know this. This is not a quick fix. This is not something easy. This is not a pray a couple times and all of a sudden your husband's going to be everything that you could ever have dreamt of. Not by any means. I have been praying and bringing all of these things to God for about 2.5, close to 3 years now. It's been a while. And I've been living in a marriage where I didn't feel fulfilled, where I was upset and unhappy and frustrated and angry and all of the negative feelings you can feel for 5 years. And I think I'm getting off easy because I know that there are people who have lived in that kind of marriage much, much, much longer. I do have some encouragement though. Eventually, God does work. He works in his own time, but he works. He works hard. And now, my husband, recently, God has been doing the most amazing things in his heart. And I literally have not been saying anything to him. I haven't been trying to change him at all for a while. And I stopped, nagging him about anything. And there are things that had been things since we first got married. There are things that had been things since before we got married that he never even noticed. He never realized, or I would say to him over and over and over again, and he would deny it. He had no idea they even existed or whatever. And lately he's been coming home and saying, babe, I was thinking about some stuff today. And he will literally say to me things that I have been trying to communicate to him for years. Years. But that is a product of God and what God is doing in his life, not of me, not of the things that I was doing to try and get him to change or get him to be better. And it's amazing to see God work. It is phenomenal to see God work. Now, I do want to say this. If you're living in a marriage where your husband is abusive in any way, shape, or form, please find somebody wiser than me, because I don't have the answers for you. I really don't. I can only speak from my own experience, and my husband is probably about as far away from being abusive as you can be. I mean, he's just not that kind of man. And so I have no experience in this area, and I would hate to mislead you or misguide you in any way, shape, or form. But for the rest of us, in fairly ordinary marriages, lifeless marriages, marriages that have lost their passion or their spark, marriages that are just not what we wanted them to be, I urge you to start with prayer. Get on your knees and pray. It will change your life. At the very least, God will change your heart, even if he can't work on your husband's, because your husband won't let him in. He will work on your heart, and he will help you to be better. He will help you to love and accept your husband exactly where he's at. He will help you because he will fill in the gaps. And I'm still figuring out exactly how that works. Because I'll be honest, I've heard from many women, oh, you have to have this relationship with God because all of the ways in which your husband doesn't fulfill you, God will. But there's still a lot of questions that I have surrounding that, so I can't really speak to that. But I will say, there are a lot of instances in which something was bothering me or hurting my feelings or upsetting me or whatever, and I'd sit and I'd pray about it for a while, and I'd give it to God, and once I had fully surrendered it, it stopped being a problem. And so I do know that that happens, and I can speak to that. So the book that I mentioned, The Power of a Praying Wife by Stormy O. Martin, is linked down below in the description if you want to go check it out. And if you do, I promise you're going to get something amazing out of it. And if you don't, well, prayer's free. Try it. Seriously, before you keep delving into all of the ways in which you can fix your marriage, before you keep hounding your husband on all the ways that he needs to change and fix himself, before you keep beating yourself up for not being the woman that you think you should be, or for contributing to whatever is going on in your marriage, pray. Because that is where change really starts happening. That's what matters. And that's all I have for you today. So if you enjoyed this video and you think that somebody else might enjoy it, would you mind hitting the like button, maybe sharing it with some of your friends? And if you really like content like this, I put content out like this every Tuesdays and Saturdays. So if you want to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell, you'll get notifications every time I post. Also, if you just like me and you want to follow me on Instagram, here's my handle. If you do follow me on Instagram, you can shoot me a message and I would love to start up a conversation with you. Also, if you have any thoughts or you just want to share your story or you just want to chat, leave me a comment down below and I would love to talk with you about any of this or any mom-related stuff or just to say hi. Thank you so much for being here. And I know that this is such a rough topic. I know this is so hard. And I just want you to know that you're not alone. You're not the only one. You are not the only one struggling in your marriage. You're not the only one questioning yourself whether or not you're even a good wife, or questioning whether or not you married the right person. Honestly, on that note, I have a little piece of something. I'm not sure if it's wisdom or encouragement or what, but there is no right person. I really don't think that there is. I think that what matters more than anything is you being the right person. It doesn't matter who you marry, it matters who you are in your marriage. That's what's most important. And I think that's what God wants from us, is for us to focus on who we are and who we become and how we love, not the other person and all of the things that they need to be doing. We need to focus on ourselves in the sense that we need to focus on all the ways in which we need to be improving and be better and allow God to do what He needs to do. And we need to be completely not focused on ourselves in the sense that it's not about us. We're not becoming better for us. We're becoming better for the people that we love. We are surrendering everything over to God, not so that we can be happy and fulfilled and loved, but so that our husbands can feel happy and fulfilled and loved by us. Because if you're nagging your husband, he's not feeling loved and seen. I promise. He's not. Thank you for joining me here today. Thank you for listening to me talk. If you have anything to add, I would love to hear from you. And I hope you have an excellent week/weekend. Oh, hey, it's 4th of July. Happy 4th of July. Have an awesome day. I will talk to you on Tuesday. Bye.